Well, good morning, YouTube. Tell you what, guys, it has been a crazy couple of days since we've had Goliath all taken apart. If you guys watch the HOMESTEAD channel, you realize that on Saturday I tried to fix the tractor tires and that didn't go so well. Sunday I decided, screw it, I'm gonna go for a ride because the weather ended up being nice, and you haven't seen that video yet because I haven't edited that video yet. I use 360 and that always takes longer to edit, and I've just been too tired, too exhausted, and not in a hurry to do it. So Monday, I got back on to trying to track down all the parts to get Goliath back together, the air compressor and the fuel pump and everything. And I hate to say it, but so many people I talked to, trying to explain to them what I was trying to do to convert it to the different style, it just baffled them. They couldn't quite understand what I was saying. And I think it's because the configuration that was on Goliath was so different than most 60 series Detroits, and what I'm trying to do was put it back to what most of them have to make it easier in the future. So if you saw the last video, we had a fuel pump up on the top of the back side of that front cover. Just below it, there was like an intermediary shaft housing, and then on the end of that shaft housing was the air compressor itself. That air compressor is a basically made of pure unobtainium air compressor. There are actually a few that you can get, really high priced, like anywhere from $1,300 to $1,700 for the compressor, with like a $500 or to a $900 core, depending on where I bought them. And they're getting increasingly more rare. So my concern with going back to what I had was that the next time the compressor goes bad, or when the compressor goes bad again, I may not be able to get that compressor. And because right now the truck is parked and I'm not in an absolute hurry to get anywhere, I've got the time to put into making this all work. If the compressor completely failed on the side of the road, trying to find that impossible compressor to find could really put us in a bad spot, kind of like last year where we spent 10 days in a truck stop. We don't want to do that. So with the way I am changing it, I'm changing it over to a more common part that is normally readily available. In fact, the air compressor, I finally found it in stock at the Fleet Pride over in Chattanooga. They also had the fuel pump for me in stock. There was something they had to order. Oh yeah, the little coupler that goes between the fuel pump and the air compressor. It's like a cush drive, kind of like in a rear sprocket of a motorcycle wheel. That he had to order. So anyway, all the parts came in yesterday, Tuesday. So I drove to Chattanooga to pick up those parts. Now, one of the complications was, since we're changing the configuration, the hole where the fuel pump was mounted, we no longer need. So I needed a block-off plate for it. Luckily, I was able to go to a local salvage yard down there in North Georgia, just south of Chattanooga, about 10 miles or so. And I found the block-off plate. It was in rough shape, but I got it. I also found the air intake tube for the conversion I want to do to get rid of that air filter. Luckily, I was able to get them, and then last night I took them to the shop. I cleaned them all up, kind of them, repainted them, and well, obviously they look a whole lot better, and I can't wait to get them put on the truck. Now, anyway, after ordering all the parts on Monday, I decided that since nothing was going to be in until Tuesday, I would come over here and clean up Goliath. So I broke out the hot pressure washer that Joe has in the building. And unfortunately, that took me an hour and a half to get working right. It didn't want to work. Hour and a half just so I could wash Goliath. But you know, with that hot box, it really makes it work so well. So we basically steam cleaned and hot washed the whole engine area, even some underneath, even areas I'm not really working because I had it out, might as well. And then I let it dry overnight and decided that yesterday morning, before heading out to Chattanooga to pick up the parts, I came over and I spray painted the side of the block. Most Detroit 60 series are kind of a silvery color, and mine is a blue. It actually looks kind of like a GM corporate blue, which makes sense because it's a GMC. Unfortunately, I didn't have any GM corporate blue in my spray paint cabinet, but I did have some Ford blue. So yeah, it's Ford blue, and if you don't like it, too bad. But anyway, it looks a whole lot better now. I have, I believe, everything I need to really start putting it together, with a few exceptions. I know that this new configuration, I'm gonna have to get some different lines made, the air line, maybe even the coolant line. The air compressor intake even came with a hose on it. The hose is in good shape. It's a little discolored, but it's in good shape. So we're just going to use that for right now until I can replace it. The one thing I could not find was the proper size drill bit to drill the intake manifold in order to tap it for the 1/2-inch pipe thread fitting that needs to go in there. It says I need a 45/64 drill bit, which I cannot find. The closest to it would be an 11/16, and believe it or not, I cannot find 11/16. I have a 5/8, so I may go ahead and drill it to 5/8 and see if I can't get the tap to work in that. I know it's a little bit smaller, but sometimes it's just aluminum. Sometimes we can get away with it. I don't know. So anyway, I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I've talked enough. At this point, let's get back into putting this thing together. And I just remembered one of the things I forgot. I talked about replacing the sensors. There's the one there, and then there's the one right down. Where is it? It's down there somewhere. Well, through Detroit Diesel, those sensors, both of them, are on back order, and they have been for more than a year. So I looked into getting some aftermarket ones. Dorman makes one and a couple other companies. But after talking to the dealer, he suggested that I didn't. He goes, look, they're cheaper, they're not that expensive, and I understand what you're trying to do. He goes, but we've seen a lot of failures with the aftermarket sensors. And if your truck is running good now, he goes, I wouldn't mess with it. You're more likely to have a failure on the new one that you put in than you are in those OEM ones that may have been in there for 40 years because they're just that much better quality. I confirmed that with my rep over at Fleet Pride. He said, yeah, he's kind of right. He goes, if you were broke down, yeah, put a sensor in there to get you back up and running. He goes, but to take out a perfectly good sensor to put one in that might possibly be inferior. So we're not changing the sensors at this point. But I did bring some dielectric grease over with me, so I am going to dielectric grease the terminals and everything when I do put it back together for the final assembly, and that should help keep everything water sealed and whatnot. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get to this. As you can see, the block isn't absolutely perfect, but all that black, nasty oil and yuckiness is gone. And I think we're going to start by putting that block-off plate in place first. And before blasting with the hot water pressure washer, I degreased everything with some Amsoil engine degreaser. So I decided to paint the front cover and the inlet pipe a different color than the block, only because when I went to the shop last night, I didn't bring the blue paint with me. So I found some metallic silver there. I think that'll look pretty good, but look, it looks like almost like a brand new piece. All right, for the front cover, I was not able to get an actual gasket for it. And if you look at the original piece, it had the embossment inside with an O-ring on it. The new one is just flat and it mounts to the surface. It does not go into the actual opening. So instead, I'm using Permatex The Right Stuff sealant. This is my favorite stuff. I think it works better than most of the silicone things out there. So 1 minute, it's just to assemble within 5 minutes. I've always thought this stuff was so much better, so that's what I use. It's not cheap. This little tube is $35. But when you want something done right, sometimes you got to pay a little extra money. So we're going to let that cure up for just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to bolt it right together. All right, with that cover on, the next thing I really want to do is I want to test fit the compressor, because there's something I noticed about the compressor. On the original compressor, our air outlet was right here and our air intake was right here. On the new compressor, that air intake is actually on this side over here behind this cover. So I have the fitting for it, but you see how far that fitting comes off of this? And I'm really hoping that that is not going to interfere with the engine block itself. Likewise, I'm hoping that that coolant hose that's sticking out of there is not going to interfere. Now, that hose is way too long. I probably need to shorten it anyways. I actually had somebody put that on for me like years ago when I first bought Goliath. It was leaking. And why they used a 4-foot long hose to go like 8 inches, I'm not sure. But it's a good durable hose. I just kind of left it like that. There was no harm in it. It just, the routing looked terrible, but functionality wise, it was spot on. So yeah, I just want to make sure that all fits. Now, the top bolt where the compressor goes, right here on most 60 series, is actually a stud that we can kind of hang the compressor and slide it in. Well, on mine, it wasn't a stud, it was this bolt right here. So what I've done is I went to the hardware store and I picked up a couple of longer bolts that were the proper length. I could not find studs in the length I wanted. So I went ahead and got the bolts, and my hopes is that I can just cut the end of the bolt off, put it in there and use it as a guide stud, even if I take it out and put the bolt back in afterwards. But that'll give me something. I'll put two of them in there. That'll give me two good spots to slide that whole compressor in, because this sucker is heavy, and trying to support the weight and line up the bolt holes can be trying. So hopefully that will make my job easier. All right, so with the intake bolted on and my guide studs in place, I'm gonna try to test fit it. All right, well, obviously I couldn't film it while I was holding it, but yes, this is interfering. It looks like the air pipe will fit back here without a problem, but I am gonna have to get this closer. So I'm probably gonna have to take this fitting out and just put a 90-degree fitting in so I can keep it closer to the block, whether I go up or down, whichever way I go. Probably go up and then loop it back down to the compressor. All right, so I broke that loose and leaned it down. I've got the rest of the coolant draining out into this 15-gallon jug. I did not drain the coolant in its entirety. I only disconnected the lines that went to the compressor, and I drained them right from those lines into this jug. But each time I work my way down, I got to drain a little bit more. This way I have to drain the entire system, and I'll just have to put this back in. So let that finish draining, and then I will remove this fitting and see what we can come up with to route it differently. All right, with that hose out of the way, we're not fully seated back here, but leaned it up, I'm pretty darn close. Anyway, I know it's going to fit. I just got to get those gears in there to jive completely. And it looks like our intake is going to be fine to run over to here. So yeah, fitment is good. I just have to figure out how to replumb that coolant passage. And I think if I just do a straight 90 up and then over to here and loop it, so it'll connect here, probably come up and then loop down. So I'll point that one almost straight up but back at an angle and loop it over this way, I hope. Fortunately, I don't know if I have the proper fitting for that here just yet. I went and picked up a bunch of fittings, but that particular fitting, I wasn't sure if I needed yet. And unfortunately, they were limited on what fittings. So I went and grabbed a few things, probably not all. I know I'm gonna have to make trips to get fittings and whatnot, but that's all part of this mock-up process. So now that I know it basically fits in there, and I know what I've got to do to make that coolant line fix, I'm gonna measure my oil line, because there's an oil port back up in there just above the compressor. That fitting right there, and you see it comes out, it comes out through the side, and it came down and it went into the very end of the other compressor. But since our fuel pump is here, I believe this is the oil feed for this one. I'm trying to verify that online looking at diagrams, but then I gotta see if my oil line that I had is long enough. But you see, I've got it almost sitting all the way in there. The gear isn't perfectly meshed. And I did watch a couple of videos online a few nights ago about some of the struggles that people have had putting this in. And one guy said it was actually easier to remove the power steering pump first, because that way you don't have to worry about engaging that gear while you're engaging the main gears over here, and then just put the pump in afterwards, because there's like a triple gear setup in there that's all got to mesh all at the same time for the compressor to seat. And obviously we don't want to go forcing anything. We don't want to try to use the bolts to draw it in, not knowing if it's perfectly aligned or not, because that could be very dangerous and break something in there. So, you know, I've got the gasket sealer. It's only 5 little bolts that hold that power steering pump on the front. And so yeah, when it comes that time, I may just pull it off and clean that surface, mount the compressor, and then put that in from the other side. I think that might be the easiest way to do it. And then I can also paint the power steering pump too, make it look a little nicer. Here's a good example of why I want to replace these lines. I just barely turned on that hose a little bit and just completely busted a gut open. So yeah, that one ain't no good no more. I'm hoping that I can get some of this hose from my local Napa. The ends, these are the type of ends that I can put on myself. They don't require a crimp, and that way I can kind of rebuild a lot of this stuff myself. All right, so now I'm going to take the compressor back off and lay it here on the tailgate because I need to transfer plugs. Now that I've decided where I'm going to do my water inlet, where I'm going to do my air outlet, my water outlet, I can plug off all of the other locations that I'm not going to use. You know, one of the hard parts about putting this all back together is because I got new parts now, I'm really trying not to get my nasty greasy fingerprints all over. So I'm like constantly washing my hands in between touching the yucky stuff and the not so yucky stuff. But all right, so I've decided that this port back here, I can either use this or this as the intake, as the water input, and then this is the output, or I can use this as the input and one or the other of these is the output. But I'm going to use this one as the inflow, so I'm going to plug this one off. And luckily, our new compressor came with brand new plugs, so I'll use all the new plugs where I can. All right, so there's actually a whole lot less holes in this one I got to block off. So I got that one down in there. You see, it didn't even go in very far. It was tight, but that sealant that's on those threads, it was snug almost right away. Where I'm going to put the water inlet, I've got to go find a fitting for that. All I have is these compression fittings, and the way it is in there, I'll never be able to get a wrench on to do compression. So I'm just going to do a hose fitting with a hose clamp on it, just like I'm going to do on the block. Remember, this is just the water. It's hose clamped everywhere else, so that will be fine. And then the outlet, I've got this one that I took off of the other compressor, and then that steel braided line that goes back to the tank will hook to here, which then of course will get rerouted down to the air dryer and then back to the tank. But those hoses have all still got to be made. So yeah, I've got a whole bunch of extra little block offs and stuff from the other ones. This was the fitting that was the air outlet on the other compressor, and it sat right on there like so, right? But it's, I don't know why, but it's like dumbed down. So there's a bushing in there that goes from a 1/2 inch to a 3/8, and the 3/8 goes back up to a 1/2 inch compression. Well, here I've got a 1/2 inch compression that threads right in, so I could have used either of these, but there's 3 different fittings there. This way there's only one. To me, that just makes sense. Less likely to leak, and it's not being reduced also, so it's going to give better flow this way. Not that that may not make much of a difference, but I think it's a better idea to do it that way. Well, good morning again, YouTube. All right, it's the next day. A much cloudier, overcast, and chilly day. It's only about 45 degrees, and the wind is it's not horribly bad, but with it being this cold, it's making it uncomfortable. So yeah, I had to dress a little bit warmer today to get this done. When I last left you, I was trying to figure out oil line and coolant line configuration, and I thought I had something solved. I may have, but I'm still running into some issues with the coolant line. So here you can see I've got it mocked up again, but with that fitting sticking out there, it will not clear the cover, and you see we're not in all the way. Now, with that mostly mocked up yesterday, it looked like there was plenty of room to get a fitting in there, but the fitting is bigger in reality than it was in my mind. So last night I was trying to find just a 90-degree barbed fitting for 1/2 inch hose barb and 1/2 inch pipe thread, and I couldn't find a single fitting that would work. I even searched the internet, couldn't get anything in time. So I'm gonna have to, two-piece it. And I'm afraid that this is gonna, protrude out of the block a little bit further than I like it to. But all in all, I think it's, well, yeah, I'm hoping it will still work. It sticks out less than the original 90-degree did on that coolant line because we don't have that adapter going in there. So I'm hoping that will work. But yeah, clearances are definitely getting really tight on this. So because I couldn't get anything last night, I took a lot of these other fittings and parts that I needed. I took them over to the shop, put them in the ultrasonic cleaner again, cleaned everything up. Even like the fitting here that we decided to use on top, just, making that stuff look pretty and stuff again. For the most part, they're still used fittings, but there's nothing wrong with them. I cleaned them up pretty good. These bolts right here that held the air governor to the compressor, they were so rusty, I had to pry them out of the old air governor, just covered with rust. So I cleaned them up really good. And I'll probably put some anti-seize or something on those shafts before I bolt all that stuff back together. So yeah, a little bit detail work, but it's all coming along nicely. Now for the oil line, none of the automotive stores had this flexible, like cloth braided or fiber braided line. All they had was well, hydraulic line. And hydraulic line, the way I need to bend this, I was afraid it wasn't going to have the flexibility that I needed. Plus the fittings are so much larger. But then I remembered my friend Bill over at Route 64 Speed Shop does a lot of hot rod and race car work. He had some braided line there and a couple of fittings that I can use to make everything work out perfect. I hope. We're gonna try that next. So last night I cleaned up these fittings and I'm hoping it will work in the new hose. It's a slightly different style of hose than what we had, but it all looks like it should still work. It's rated for fuel, it's rated for oil. It's what they build race car plumbing out of. So I just gotta make sure this all fits, and then that should solve the oil line problem. And I got it longer than I needed, so I can get the one end in the back in place and installed, then put the air compressor in, then I can cut this to length exactly where I need it. Should make it very clean, very neat. Now the end is a little bit fuzzy where it's been cut before, but I've got the proper cutters. We're gonna clean up that end before putting our fitting on. All right, and for those of you that have never used this style of fitting, it's commonly referred to as like an AN style fitting, but this coupler right here will actually thread under the hose. You'll see there's some very coarse threads on the inside, and they are a reverse thread. So you just thread this on to the hose. Sometimes you can do it by hand. On bigger, heavier hoses, a lot of times I'll actually put an impact socket on it and run it on with an impact driver. But I think with a small of a hose, I should just be able to thread it on by hand until the hose seats at the very end. And then you take the other piece and you put it inside. It looks like we're seated pretty good in there. And then this piece will thread into here. Now we just tighten that all the way down until this seats against this. And there we go, finished product. Now once I get that installed and cut the length, I've got a fitting that fits the new air compressor and another fitting for the other side of the hose to complete all that. All right, so there it is installed up there. I don't have it all the way tight yet just because I'm still deciding on my routing, but I got plenty of length that I can cut short when I need to. Now my options are I can route it out over the top and then come down to that fitting. I can come around the compressor over the top. So I can bring that line this way and come down like this and go to here, or I can bring it down behind the compressor over the top here and put it to there, which is the way I'm leaning towards. And then the fuel pump will go there, obviously, but I think that's the cleaner look. It hides more of the line, possibly. By now I've got to get back to addressing this water pipe fitting. And well, I just felt a couple of raindrops. May complicate things. Well, my only other option will be to move this fitting over to here. It won't stick out any further than that, so I know we'll have clearance. But the fitting on the block over there sits about this level, and it sits in about this far. So it's a really short distance to try to run a hose. And it's gonna be very difficult to get to put hose clamps on. This one I can probably get to put a hose clamp on. So if I clamp the bottom one before I put the compressor in, and then fit that one, but maybe I need to point that one forward and point this one like down at an angle or something. That way I can kind of loop it and come up. Decisions. So for the water line, I got some of this 1/2-inch silicone hose, and by God is this stuff expensive. This is a 3-foot section. I also got a 3-foot section of 3/4 for the air intake hose. Because, well, I had this one, which would have worked, but I was like, why not put brand new on there instead of this faded old thing, even though there's nothing wrong with this. Had no idea that this stuff was so expensive. 6 feet total, 2 different sizes, $93. Wow, quality costs a lot of money. But now I got to figure out what kind of a bend radius I can put on this without it kinking, without it compromising, not just now, but over time as it heats up, because there's not going to be a lot of room between those two fittings, and it's going to be difficult to make the connections. And there's a good likelihood that it'll go together okay, but say someday I've got to take this off for some reason, there's a good likelihood I won't be able to get there to get the hose off of the barbs, you know, because sometimes it's really hard to pry a hose off of a barb that's been on there for a long time. There's a good likelihood that I'll have to just cut this hose and replace this short section in the future. So I'd have to keep a little bit of this on hand just in case, which isn't a bad idea anyways, but it's just a matter of whether I can make it all fit. All right, so as I'm sitting here switching that plug around, I pulled that block-off plug out from over here where I put it yesterday, cleaned all the thread sealant off of it, and moved it over to this hole, and then re-cleaned the threads in here as well. I thought of another option. I could reverse the flow of coolant through the cylinder head, which would mean that the fitting on the block right here, I could point this straight forward and then loop the hose up to the other side of the head. So it will come from here, come over, and then hook to here where I've got plenty of room to put that fitting. And then the outlet could come here and go down underneath and straight up to the back of the block where it connects to the engine again. I think that might actually simplify my kink problem, because, you know, we don't want to be kinky, or do we? Now, in order to be able to do that, I will have to get a longer hose going back to the head, because it did come from here, and with this compressor being moved further back, it will still reach, but it's just barely going to reach. So I'll have to get a longer hose, but that's really not that big of a deal. I betcha I might be able to use the old coolant hose. Remember, I've still got this hose that I just took off, and this hose is only a couple years old. I just might be able to make that work because I've got the proper fitting for it. Whew, I may have come up with a solution. All right, guys, good news. I think I can make that work. Now, I know the compressor isn't always seated. I did move my stud to here. Remember yesterday I was talking about it not going back in. I thought it was the gears not being aligned. It was because that stud was sticking out so far it was actually hitting the back of the compressor. So I moved it here where there's nothing there, just as help as a guide. And now I can get that compressor to seat all the way up, and I can get that hose running up here. I can still get the hose on the intake. I will just have to have them all assembled before I put it all into place. The oil line still fits snugly back there with plenty of clearance. So I'll just have to make sure that the air intake line, the coolant return line, and the coolant supply line to the block are all attached before the compressor goes into place. Now, right now it's all in there, but nothing's tight, nothing's been thread sealed or anything. It's just mock-up at this point to make sure it all works. But I think that is going to be our answer. The next obstacle I have to overcome is, like I said, that stud that I made as a guide. It's got to be shorter for the compressor to slide all the way on, and I need threads on the other end of it. I need to be able to thread a nut onto it. I was thinking before that I could just slide over the stud first, take out the stud, put the bolt in, but there's not enough room between the flange and the compressor to get the bolt in there. So I've got to come up with a way to either find the stud or thread one of these bolts. Now, they're grade 8 bolts. Not exactly easy to thread, but I'm gonna try it. Well, I was concerned a little bit with rain, but I'm actually getting these little teeny tiny pieces of frozen rain coming down. Like, you know, that stuff that looks like big chunks of salt hitting me and bouncing off and then melting. Hopefully it doesn't get any worse than this. I really want to get this done. Well, it took a good 20 minutes of actually running the die across this, but I now have my stud. I believe it's the right length. So I'm going to install it. I'm going to Loctite it into the block. I've cleaned the threaded holes in the front cover, not actually the block, the best I can. However, they're really deep before the threads start because it's a 2-piece case, and the back side of the case isn't threaded. The front side of the case is, and that's why there's such a long shaft on these. So it's like I can't get in there to chase the threads. So I'm just using brake clean and running bolts in and out to try to clean it up the best I can. And hopefully we'll get it clean enough that all this will bond good and stay where I need it. Wow, I really wish I had a camera in my hand. That was the sight. I walked back to the trailer to go grab a smaller 5/16 socket so I can tighten up the hose clamps, right? And as I'm coming back over here, a gust of wind to come through and pick this plastic bag up out of the bed of my truck. And so I walked the way it was blowing to try to grab it. It hit the ground. Just before I could get to it, it blew 10 feet further. And then just before I get to it again, it blew 10 feet further. Before I know it, it was all the way out in the street and around the corner of the building. So it had completely hit that grass line over there. And then a car came by and made it blow around the side of the building. Now, I know some people would have just let it go, and I felt like a dork chasing it, but I don't like littering. Anyway, almost got this back together. All right, so I've got my hoses put on here, clamped, everything's tightened. The other ends are dangling. I have got my oil line and my coolant line here clamped. Everything's tightened, everything is sealed. Lines are ran to where I can work with them afterwards. I think we're actually ready to install the compressor. I've also put the spline gear back in here. This slides in and out. That's going to make it a little bit more challenging to fit inside there because we have to mesh the big gear here and that little gear there. Now this turns relatively easy, but this does not turn at all. So trying to get it all indexed to where it will slide together could be a little bit tricky. Could be. I've got this stud loose so it acts as a guide, but I can take it out with my fingers afterwards. So now I think we just got to get our gasket prepped and then hopefully hoist it up in there one last time. And I thought it was just the single gasket, but it turns out it's an entire gasket kit. But I thought it was just the one for here. Now I've got another fuel pump gasket. Remember, I made one of those. I guess I should have checked first, but oh well, what's done is done. This one we don't need because we're just using the thread in fitting. And then this one is for the governor, which I believe the governor kit comes with a new one. But anyway, all the gaskets I don't need, I'm going to put back in the box for safekeeping. Now, I did put a really, really tiny bead of sealant around this so that when I go to stick it on the front cover, it'll kind of stay in its place and hopefully not flop around because I might fidget with this to get it all lined up. I don't want that getting damaged. And the gasket is in place and staying nice and neat. Now, hopefully, I'll only have to lift this heavy son of a gun this one last time to get it all in there, and hopefully everything goes super smooth. Anybody want to take bets? Hey, and if this is your first time doing this as well, out of all the bolts that hold that compressor to the front cover, one of them is short. Make sure the short one goes back in the right place. So the bottom hole is long because it goes into the front cover. Same with here, same with here. Here you're gonna have your stud. This one you can see goes all the way through and into the front cover, but this one, because that gear is right there, that is where the short bolt goes. Don't screw it up, but you'll drive the bolt right into that gear. And actually, it's a blind hole, so you probably won't drive it into the gear, but you won't get it very far. And of course, that inner gear doesn't want to line up, so I can't get it to seat all the way. I can get it closer than that, but right now the weight's just kind of pulling it down. But yep, just not quite engaging with the gear and the power steering pump. So now the debate is, do I pull it out, try to index that pump a tiny bit more, see if it goes back in? Or do I just take the pump off, get the compressor mounted, and deal with that lighter piece trying to put it back in? I think before I break that seal, I'm gonna try one more time on this. Now it's over here, I should just be able to slide it back, reach in there and turn that one way or the other. Try to get it to line up better. And would you look at that? Got it. So I'm getting my bolts started before I take that stud out of the bottom. But that short bolt we talked about in the back, you have to use an extension to reach in there because you can't get your hands in there. The bolt was a little loose in the socket, so I wrapped the head with some Teflon tape just to kind of hold it in the socket better. Hopefully I can reach back there and get it started. Okay, so my plan worked perfect, except for the fact that I didn't compensate for the fact that anyway, with the air compressor in place, I couldn't get my hand in there to get this. Now, it was only finger tight, obviously, but It was all I could do to get it out. So that little hose plier tool worked perfect. I was able to reach down there and grab it and just rotate it out until it unthreaded. Problem solved. Okay, the air compressor and the fuel pump are installed. They're physically in place. Everything is torqued down. I did change my mind on the way I was going to route that oil line. Let me show you. So I thought about bringing it up over this way, but the way this kind of stuck out or whatever, I decided coming this way would be better. I've got this bolt right here. I'm going to find another one of these retainers, and I will retain it right there. That'll keep it nice and secure. So the coolant line is hooked up to the block. I need to go get a fitting for here, but then yeah, it's just going to loop and go right there. The intake line will go there, and it's going to go up here once I get the fitting in there. And the other coolant line is here. I've got to get way back in there to hook it up. And then we still got to deal with the fuel lines, and that's it. And I don't have enough of this new black line to do both of the hoses from the fuel pump, but I can probably do the short one that goes, which is the output from the pump to the secondary filter. That one, I've definitely got enough to do, but the one coming from the other fuel filter is definitely longer, could be more challenging. And if I'm not mistaken, this was all of that line that Bill had up there at the speed shop. So I'll do what I can. I may have to order more line, but at least I can just replace that stuff later on if I need to. My next concern is the fuel pump in its original configuration had the lines coming in on the outsides. The new one has got them on the front, and I don't know if there's enough room in there for me to put these fittings in and be able to actually turn them and tighten them up. I think it will work, but I'm not positive. The thing is, I want to kind of do that as quick as possible, because at this point we haven't breached the fuel system, and these Detroits are known for being really hard to start once you kind of drain the system. So what I'd like to do is kind of make sure that everything fits. That way I can undo these lines as quick as possible. I don't know. Man, it's about 7 o'clock at night now, evening, whatever, and it is just getting downright cold out here. My hands are actually cold and kind of going numb. I'm just going to figure out my next game plan. I may have to go get some parts in the morning, the fittings or whatnot, if I need to, if I want to do what I want to do. But all in all, it's looking pretty good. All right, so now I have turned my focus to the governor. So I've got the old one still here, and I can see which ports are blocked off and where things were connected. Plus I took pictures before I took it all apart. I have the new one here that came with plugs, but no plugs were in place, so I plugged the same exact holes in the new one that were plugged on the old one. I'm gonna go see, there's two different ways I can put it vertically or I can put it horizontally. I'm not sure which way I'm going to do it just yet, but we're gonna go check it out, see which way it fits the best. The old compressor, it went vertically like this, but we can see there is a clearance issue there. It almost fits, so I may have to move it this way. Well, yeah, I don't think it matters. I can do it that way or that way. Yeah, so I'm thinking that's how we're gonna mount it, but can't do that until after we get that fitting in for the coolant line. Otherwise, we won't be able to turn the fitting. All right, so I guess we're gonna pause on that for the moment. I need that one fitting to complete this whole thing. But guys, it is seriously getting cold out here. It's clouding up, you know, between the snow and the ice or whatever. Yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and clean up, head home, take a nice warm shower, and we'll get back at this tomorrow. The weather's supposed to be beautiful tomorrow, I hope. So we'll see. All right, back up here at Goliath the next morning, and wow, what a difference a day makes. It is a much more beautiful day. It's still chilly, it's in the 50s, It's not as windy and not as overcast as it was yesterday, so it actually feels a whole lot nicer. Now, when we closed the video last night, I needed to go out and get the fitting so I can finish the outlet, actually the inlet. So I can finish the inlet side to the compressor for the coolant hose. And of course, I still got to connect the other side of the outlet back to the engine block. And I was going to go do that first thing this morning, then I remembered I still need to put the air dryer in down here, and it would make sense for me to mount that first. That way, when I go into town to get fittings, I can also figure out what I need for these fittings and get it all done and hopefully make less trips into town. So this shouldn't take very long to get that air dryer put in there. As you saw in the last video, I've got one existing hole that works perfect. The other hole almost lines up, so I just need to kind of waller it out a little bit, and then I will have to drill a third hole in the appropriate place. So I broke out a couple tools. We're going to get that done first and then figure out our routing for the hoses. So I don't have my air compressor up here, and well, there's one packed in the trailer, but I don't want to dig it all out. And because I can't run the truck, I can't use air compressor on the truck, so I put my little rotary bit on the drill, and I'm hoping that will be enough to waller out that hole. All right, it's on there very securely with the 2 bolts. It's drawn back, it's flush. Now I'm just gonna mark where the 3rd bolt is gonna go through and try to drill it. You know, and to be completely honest, the bolts that hold this on, I mean, they're hefty bolts. 2 of them is probably more than sufficient to hold on a device that only weighs like 3 pounds. So if I can't drill it, because this metal is very difficult to drill, and I don't have one of those mag drill type things, so I'm just doing it by hand, which, you know, can be done, just not as easy. But worst case scenario, I'll leave it like it is. I get no problem with 2 bolts holding it on. All right, I got the 1/4 inch hole drilled. Low speed, very firm pressure. It took some time, but we got through it. I don't know how much I've got to phase this up. My 9/16 bit is really sharp. I may just try it before doing any of the intermediates, because I think it will cut better than some of my other bits here that might be less than as sharp as I like them to be. Well, the 9/16 seems to be working well. Just going slow, not to overheat it. As long as I still keep seeing those large chunks of metal coming off, I think we'll be good. All right, I now have my, right there, 9/16 hole, but it doesn't look like I got it quite centered. And there we go, 3 mounting points. All right, there it is, the final installation. It is on there, super good, super secure. Now I can figure out my fittings and how I want to route the airlines. So we're gonna need an airline that runs from the top of the compressor down to this fitting here. So I will probably, well, these lines here will be gone. Probably just run it right straight down and over this way, kind of over the top and right to there. There's gonna be the signal line over here that's gotta run up to the governor. And then the line here that's gonna go all the way back to the primary tank. All right, so I've got a basic idea of what I'm gonna do here. Like I said, these fittings aren't tight yet, just mock up. I think I need to do like a 90-degree fitting there so I can bring this in from the side, and then maybe even still put one of these sweeps on it so that it curves back towards the frame. But the length of that hose that I took off of the main one seems pretty good. Now that where it went all the way back to the tank, I want to replace that too, where it's going to come from here, try to do the same thing. Now I'm going to turn my focus to hooking up the other end of the coolant outlet back to the back of the block. And to do that, I had to pull off the doghouse because that goes right there. All right, I'm gonna verify that my fittings are the same. And yes, they're both 1/2 inch. So I'm just gonna route that back there. It's gonna be a little bit long, but I'm gonna have to loop it somehow. But you can clearly see what rough shape this hose was in. So yeah, definitely due to be replaced. It's got small cracks and stuff all through it. It was a little challenging to get to, but I got it. You know, it looks wide open. It was one of those spots where I can only get like a little bit of a turn with the adjustable wrench, and I had to flip it over to get the other angle, get another like quarter or eighth of a turn. And just the position, trying to lean in there under the steering wheel, up against the seat, it was very difficult to maintain a good body position to make it all work, but I got it. All right, so now I'm turning my focus to drilling the bottom of the intake manifold so that I can get the fittings in there for the air intake. Now, what I've done is drilled it almost all the way through, but not quite. I've got it enough where I can just get the tip of this pick in there and not the drill bit all the way through. I don't want to get any metal inside the intake. So now I've got the shop vac set up right here. So I am going to power on the shop vac as I finish that drill. And then in theory, even though we're going up, most of the debris is falling down. In fact, you can see all of the shavings on the ground and up here. But once that drill bit breaks through, there is a possibility of a couple of pieces getting inside. Even though the way the flutes work on a drill, it's going to feed it down through the bottom, but it doesn't guarantee that 100% of it's going to come out through the bottom. So the shop vac up top, that way if anything does get up there, it should hopefully suck it right out into the vacuum and not cause any issues with pieces of metal going into the intake manifold. Probably. All right, drilled, tapped, fitting test fitted, all seems to be a success. Now just as a double check, I put a little bit of grease on the end of this pick. I'm gonna put it up in the hole, rest that down on the ledge, spin it around just to make sure that there was nothing up there that kind of got caught. I'm hoping the grease will catch it and bring it down. If the vacuum didn't get it, chances are it ain't coming loose anyways, but we're gonna find out. All right, there we go. The air inlet is now complete to the compressor. Now, truth is, I'm not overly crazy about how many fittings I had to stack to get that the way I wanted it. I couldn't find a 1/2-inch thread that went to a 3/4 hose with a 90 degree. It just didn't exist anywhere I could find it. So for right now, that's what I got. Eventually I'll find something, and that's relatively easy to just change out that fitting. But for now, it works, and that's what's important. So I pulled the main air line out that goes from the air dryer, which originally came from the compressor, all the way back to the primary tank. I didn't realize it was a flexible hose for a couple of feet that went into a hard line and routed up, and then into another flexible hose, which then connected to another flexible hose. We're going to replace it with just one piece of flexible hose. Hi guys, so I'm back up at the O'Reilly again. I brought that hose up here, or that line, part hard line, part hose. We're going to remake that full length without all those connections. We just counted, there was like 11 connections in the way this hose was done because it was so many pieces. We're going to make it one piece from the tank to the air dryer, and then one piece from the air dryer to the actual compressor. We just figured it all out, figured out all our ends. He's got everything in stock, so he's going to make the hoses for me. I can take them back and put them on. I also went by Bill's speed shop before coming here. I got a few more fittings to hopefully do one of those fuel lines. He didn't have enough hose to do the second one, but at least gonna get one of them done.
Back here, I guess not. All right, so back from O'Reilly and the speed shop with, I know,
another few $100 worth of stuff. I know it doesn't look like it, but these two hoses to have them made was like $251, mostly because of these 90-degree bends. Those are like $48 a piece. Plus there's 3 other fittings, plus however much it is per foot on the hose. I got an 8-foot section and a 36-inch section. This is the remaining hose that I had from yesterday, but I also had to buy these fittings so I can finish the water inlet. Get put together and go right there with the hose barb for this hose to hook to. And then these fittings to do the other fuel line that will be from the inlet here to the outlet on that fuel filter housing. All right, focus first is going to be on the fitting for the coolant hose. So I'm going to pre-assemble this and then I'll put that in afterwards, I think. Okay, coolant line done, and I had to put the air governor on at the same time because I had to make sure they cleared. If you notice, I put the governor on upside down. Now, it shouldn't matter the way it's orientated. I saw in some videos in the past that some of them were horizontal. Mine was vertical, but in this new position, it wouldn't fit vertically with the plastic cap on top, where you remove it to make the adjustments for the pressure. It would hit the intake manifold. I couldn't bring it forward because it would hit the fitting for the coolant line. If I ran it back, it cleared, but it would have been almost impossible to get in there to make any adjustments to the governor if need be. So pointing it down, I still have access to everything and everything fits. And in theory, there's nothing that needs to drain or anything. It's just a matter of air passages that open and close on pressure. And it's all spring and diaphragm in there. So it shouldn't matter that it's upside down. I didn't put the lines on it yet. I want to get the fuel lines plumbed first. So ideally, I wanted to use this 180-degree fitting on the back fitting of the fuel pump. So I wanted to put the fitting here, and I thought then we could make this loop back under there and bring it around and use the 90-degree fitting over here, similar to this. And that would keep that line nice and short, clean, and out of the way. But I was thinking that this was the inlet. This is the outlet from the filter, which is going to go to the inlet of the pump, which is here. And because of this embossment, it might be a little bit tricky. I can physically get it to fit. All right, so it's on there, but it's close. I might be able to tweak this a little bit, but then it's going to run out front and down, which I guess isn't horrible, but I was liking the idea of it being back behind and out of the way. All right, all in all, I found a way to make it work. I ended up reversing the ends. I'm going to use the 90-degree at the pump, and I'm going to use my little spread out 180 at the actual filter outlet, and it will tuck it back behind the pump, keep it pretty nice and neat. All right, there we go, all buttoned up. I think that's about as clean and neat as we can get it. So now on Monday, when the remainder of the fuel line comes in, I'll get 2 more fittings, one to go to the other filter and one to go to the outlet on the pump, and then both of those fuel lines will be completely redone and finished. Sad thing is, I wish I would have got those 2 fittings, because now that the way I routed it different, this piece I have left is enough to do that other section. But I didn't get the fittings because I figured I'd get them on Monday when I got this. Well, I called Bill over the shop and the shop phone just rang. So I texted his cell phone to see if he happened to still be there, so I can run over to get those 4 fittings. That'll be done. But until I hear back from him, I'm focusing on the high pressure compressor lines now. So we had a 36-inch piece made that will go from here down to this fitting, and then an 8-foot piece that will go from here all the way back to the air tank down there. My concern is with these fittings sticking out now, whether or not the hood will still close, because it was pretty close when this wasn't fully bolted in, it was hanging out. So I'm going to drop the hood and see if it clears. Well, I didn't feel it hit anything on the way down. Let's take a look. All right, they're actually below that fender guard, but I think that'll work. Well, I goofed again. I thought this end was the same as all these other ends, and it's not. So this is the fitting I had in the very top of the compressor, and it doesn't fit the new hose. And I got that hose a lot longer than I needed it to be. But I don't know. I should just better go get a different fitting that will fit that, that'll fit there. It'll be the same exact fittings we had here. And just to test that, I can take one of these out and verify. Yeah, so one more of those will fix the problem. I will likely have them shorten this hose. I'll mock it back up. I'll mark it with a piece of tape. That way we can shorten her up some. Yeah, it works, just way too long. All right, so it is now Saturday, almost noon, I think. This morning, Grayson and I ran out to the O'Reilly's. We had some adjustments made to the hose. We cut a little bit shorter, put a new end on it, and I was also able to get the adapter that I needed, the fitting, to go into the top of the air compressor. So that should finalize that. Now, last night, I was running the line from the dryer back to the primary tank, and in the process of doing that, it got really dark. But I got it all done. It's down there and connected. See there where the new line goes into the tank. And you see the nasty mess underneath? Well, that's because while I was down there, I pulled the drain out of that tank and I sprayed an entire can and a half of brake clean in there, just trying to flush the oil residue that was in that tank out. And I just let it sit there and drain overnight. So today we're going to put that valve back in there, and we're going to put on the supply hose from the compressor to the dryer. And then the only thing that's left is hooking up the hoses to the governor. One goes back to that dryer, which is already hooked up there, and I've got it mocked up right here. It's not tight, but it's there. And the other one will go from the governor, which is right there, down to the dryer. And we should be done with this, with the exception of that fuel line that I got to wait till Monday to get those couple parts for. And hopefully this project will be done. All right, well, things changed pretty quick. We got that hose on there without any trouble. Went right like I wanted it to. I hooked up the line from the governor back to the air tank. But as I went to hook up the signal line from the governor to the air dryer, it was way long, if you don't remember. So this was the line that was originally on there. Remember, it was all capped off. And for some reason, I was thinking that these ends were the replaceable ones. So I thought that I'd be able to shorten this hose and make it work, but then I realized that these aren't the ones. These are actually crimped on and nothing I could do with it. So we ran back up to Napa and I had them make me a new hose, the right length with some nice ends on them. And we're gonna do that. And I was like, you know what? While we're there, went ahead and made one for the fuel line. That way I don't have to wait till Monday. Got the right fittings for it. So we're gonna get these two hoses installed. I'm gonna put the drain back in that tank, and that should finalize this whole installation changeover thing that we're doing. All right, so in the new governor line, I have indexed that fitting different from this fitting, and I'm hoping that I did the math right on that, or calculated it right, so that it will fit in down there and be somewhat relaxed when I put it back in up here. Grayson is installing those couple of fittings so we can put in the last hose. Got the air signal hose going here. Now I will run a couple zip ties to keep that tidy and tight with that. But all in all, the airlines part of it is done. Just this one last fuel line is all we got left. All right, so I think we got it all done. Coolant lines done, fuel lines done, oil line done, all of the high pressure compressed air lines done, the drain valve put back in. I think the only thing left to do is to top it back off with coolant, which I have over there in that 15-gallon jug, and start it up and test it, which we're not going to do. I'm going to put the coolant back in it here probably soon, but we're going to do an oil change on it as well. And I'm not going to bore you guys with the oil change procedure because, well, this video is probably long enough as it is. And just want to be kind of done with this video. I mean, we're well over a week into making this project happen. I don't know how much footage we have right now, but it's probably significant. And I just don't want to run it right now because we had the engine open for a little while that compressor was off. I had rags shoved in the hole, but we also pressure washed. So some water may have still gotten down in there a little bit and run down to the pan. And I just don't want to start the engine up and run that through the brand new compressor. So we're going to go ahead and do that oil change before we start it up. And so I'm going to go ahead and start draining and everything today. I am waiting for a delivery from Amsoil, which will be here Monday. for more coolant, just in case I don't have enough to refill what I took out, because I know some of it did get lost on the ground, and I'm short a little bit of oil to do the full oil change. So that won't get finished until Monday, and I don't want to drag this video out another one. So that process will be done, and when it is all done, we'll road test it. If there's any issues, I'll let you know, but for now, we're going to close this video. I want to thank you guys for watching and hanging out with this process. Boy, has it been a pain in the butt, and it really got expensive when you add everything up. But we're done with it finally, so thanks for watching. Until the next time I see you, keep those engines running.
Keep those engines running.
What did he say? Oh, and another thing, some of the videos I watched before tackling this project, I noticed that there is a bracket that bolts to the block here that goes to the air compressor, and somebody had even mentioned it in one of the comments. My truck never had that bracket, at least not the best I can tell, and in theory this should put less leverage than what was before, so it may not be necessary. But if I can find one in a salvage yard, I'll recondition it, clean it up, paint it, and put it on here. So maybe on Monday morning, I'll get up really early, go to Chattanooga, hit that salvage yard, see if we can't find that bracket. And then, yeah, I just think it's a good idea to have it there. But we never had it before, and it wasn't a problem. And this actually has less leverage. So I guess they were concerned about breaking off that front cover or cracking it. But we should be in better shape this way than we were before. So who knows?